When a father lifted the sheet in the morgue, he thought the world had stopped. His own daughter lay on the autopsy table. But when the dead girl took a breath, the entire town would witness a second chance, and the father's life would change forever. The old clock on the wall showed it was almost 8 p.m. Dr. Alvaro Medina's shift had ended over an hour ago, but he was still sitting there on a hard chair behind a desk covered with crumpled papers. The room smelled of strong disinfectant and cold coffee. The white light from the ceiling made everything look tired and a little sad. He rubbed his eyes with his fingers, pressing the bridge of his nose, trying to shake off the heaviness in his head. "Here we go again," Medina muttered to himself with a tired smile. He adjusted his glasses, took another form, checked a name, a number, a signature. It was always the same: reports, files, test requests, certificates at the San Miguel del Rio hospital. He did everything. Tired smile. He adjusted his glasses, picked up another form, checked a name, a number, a signature. It was always the same: reports, files, test requests, certificates at the San Miguel del Rio hospital. He did everything: general practitioner, on-call doctor, forensic doctor, almost a psychologist for patients. And he still found time to listen to the staff's problems in the hallway. A piece of paper fell from the pile and slid to the floor. He bent down slowly. How his vertebrae cracked. "Come on back. Just hold on a little longer," he muttered, laughing to himself. Outside, the sounds were the same as always. Hurried footsteps, the wheels of a stretcher dragging, someone coughing in the hallway, a baby crying in the distance. The hospital never slept, but he just wanted to get out of there, take the empty 9 o'clock bus, get home, and hear his daughter's voice saying, "Dad, you're home." He thought about the simple dinner he could have: a fried egg, roast chicken, rice. He also thought about the quick chat before bed, her laughter as she told him something about college. That thought always gave him a little strength. Alvaro stretched out his arm, took the pen, signed one more document, then another. His hand already felt heavy. "Last 3, Medina. Last 3, he said quietly, as if trying to negotiate with his own tiredness. The truth was that his body was crying out for bed, but his heart had already learned to live by delaying rest. He looked out the small window in the living room. The sky was dark, and some city lights flickered in the distance. San Miguel del Rio was small, but it seemed huge when one could no longer go on. Suddenly, a strange silence took over the hallway for a few seconds. A heavy silence that was different. Alvaro felt it without knowing how to explain it. He raised his head, with the pen suspended in the air. Then the noise returned, but now more agitated. Faster footsteps. A louder call. A voice asking for something urgently. His heart raced a little. The years in the hospital had taught him that the air changes when a serious emergency arrives. The door handle turned abruptly. The door opened forcefully, hitting the wall. Nurse Lucia entered, almost tripping, her face red, her eyes wide open, her hair gathered in a hurry. A few strands stuck to her sweaty forehead. "Doctor," she said, panting, clutching the door frame. "Doctor, a victim of a hit and run has arrived. I know you should have already left, but can you see this last case?" He straightened up in his chair instantly, as if someone had flipped a switch inside him. "Where?" he asked, already standing up, his voice firm but tired. "What happened?" "He's in the emergency room." Lucia swallowed, looked down for a second, as if she didn't want to say the rest. Unfortunately, she took a deep breath. Unfortunately, he didn't make it. Those 3 words were always the same, but they never hurt the same. He didn't make it. They entered her ear and went straight to her chest. Alvaro remained silent, his eyes moving to the clock on the wall, as if for a moment he were looking for an excuse. "My shift is over. I'm exhausted. Someone else can do it." But he already knew the answer before he thought about it. He was the only one who performed autopsies, the only one who signed death certificates in that hospital, the only one authorized to examine the body, fill out the paperwork, talk to the family if necessary. He was the only one. He took another deep breath and left the pen on the table. The tip made a small ticking sound as it touched the wood. "How long ago did she arrive?" he asked as he opened the drawer to take out his gloves. "About 7 minutes ago," replied Luke. She was nervously moving her hands. "They brought her in a van. There was no time for anything, doctor. The people are out there, very upset. He closed the drawer with a sharp movement. Someone called the police? He asked automatically, as if following a script he already knew by heart. Yes, they've already been notified, she replied quickly. But the family still doesn't know who she is. She wasn't carrying any documents. They just said she's young, very young. Young. The word struck him deeply. Whenever they said young, a part of him felt heavier. The death of an elderly person could somehow make sense in his mind, but that of a young person always hurt differently. He was already leaving the room when he took 2 steps back, grabbed his glasses from the table, he had forgotten them, and put them on carefully. He couldn't see anything blurry at that moment. Lucia watched his every move without taking her eyes off him. She knew Dr. Medina. She knew that behind that calm demeanor was a man who suffered every time someone arrived lifeless. "Doctor," he called out more quietly, "if you want, I can call someone from the capital for the autopsy. Or tomorrow." He shook his head, cutting off his sentence. "There's no one for tomorrow." "Lucia, and you know it," she replied with a sad smile. "Let's go now. We can't leave her there." She nodded, biting her lip as if she knew it was true, but still wanted another option. The two walked down the hallway. The walls were a white that was already sad smile. "Let's go now. We can't leave her there." She nodded, biting her lip like someone who knows it's true, but still wants another option. The two walked down the hallway. The walls were a white that had seen too many things. A few crooked pictures tried to brighten the atmosphere with motivational phrases and drawings of flowers, but they didn't help much. The smell of the hospital dampened any attempt at color. As he walked, Alvaro felt the weight of the coat on his shoulders, the pocket with the stethoscope, some folded papers, a pen that always stained with blue ink. Fatigue made the coat feel heavier than usual. A patient on a stretcher in the hallway tried to call him, "Doctor, when you have a minute." He just touched his shoulder gently without stopping. "I'll be right back." "Yes, wait a moment." He didn't know if he was really going to be able to come back, but he didn't say it in a bad way. It was his way of calming people down without promising too much. As he turned the corner that led to the morgue, the movement of the hospital faded away. Fewer voices, fewer footsteps, less life. Whenever he walked in that direction, he felt as if he were leaving the world of the living and entering another place, silent and cold, where no one complained of pain, but no one had a chance to get better either. The lights were also different there, a little dimmer, some flickering as if the hospital were saying, "No one comes here for pleasure, so I don't have to look pretty." Alvaro put on his gloves as he walked with the automatic gesture of someone who has done this 1,000 times. The latex crackled on his wrists. He rubbed one hand against the other, feeling the dry touch of the material. Lucia walked half a step behind, sometimes looking at the floor, sometimes at his back. "Did they say anything else?" he asked, trying to remember what Lucia had told him in a hurry. "Yes, they said she was on the sidewalk, walking, when she suddenly fell." Lucia spoke slowly, as if she were remembering. A motorcycle was coming slowly. It couldn't brake in time and hit her from the side, but they say it wasn't a very strong blow. The driver broke his leg but was conscious. She was already unconscious when they picked her up. Alvaro frowned. He didn't slow down, but his mind began to race. She was already unconscious before the impact. He repeated it as if mentally noting it down. "That's what the witnesses say," replied Lucia. "A woman who was there crying said she collapsed. She collapsed as if the light inside her had been turned off." That phrase kept going round and round in his head. The light inside turned off. He thought of heart problems, arrhythmias, aneurysms, blood pressure, 1,000 possibilities. A doctor's mind never rests, even when his heart just wants to go home. They reached the heavy metal door leading to the morgue. It was a cold gray door with a small opaque window behind it. Behind that door lay the end of many stories. He paused for a second with his hand on the handle. Just a second. But for a tired man, that second was almost a request for a pause, almost a silent prayer. "Let it be quick. Let me do my job well, that the family can bear it." He took a deep breath. Lucia noticed the pause. "Doctor, are you all right?" she asked softly. He did not turn to her, but replied, still looking at the door, "It's never all right here, Lucia, but let's go." He turned the handle, and a cold wind escaped from inside, mixing the smell of chemicals with that other smell he knew so well, which was not exactly death, but absence. Absence of warmth, of voice, of movement. The light inside was even whiter, all shiny, cold metal, large drawers, the steel table in the center, some instruments covered with sterilized cloths. In one corner, a white sheet covering an outstretched body. Alvaro took a few steps inside, feeling the echo of his shoes on the floor, each step seeming heavier than the last, as if he were walking with sandbags tied to his feet. Lucia stayed near the door, as she always did, helping, but she knew that in that first moment, he liked to be alone. He approached the table and closed his eyes for a moment. It wasn't out of fear of what he was about to see. Forensic doctors couldn't have that kind of fear anymore. It was out of respect. He always did that. A second of silence for someone who had just arrived there, without having chosen to. "Let's see what happened to you, little girl," he murmured, in a whisper, knowing nothing about who was there but speaking tenderly, as if she were the daughter of someone he didn't know. Before Alvaro touched the sheet, he heard quick footsteps behind him. They weren't the heavy footsteps of someone familiar with a hospital. They were short, broken steps, almost as if the person were about to fall. When he turned around, he saw a skinny boy in his 20s. He was shaking so much that it seemed as if his whole body was vibrating. His eyes were red, his breathing was very short, and his chest was rising and falling, as if he had run a marathon. Doctor, please." The boy choked on his words, wiping his nose with the sleeve of his t-shirt. I brought her. It was me." Alvaro took a step toward him, speaking in a low, calm voice, without rushing, as he did when someone was about to faint. "Calm down, son. Breathe. What's your name? Was it you who told the nurse what happened?" he asked, putting his hand on the boy's shoulder. "Boy, yes, Mateo," he replied, almost without a voice. "My name is Mateo." Lucia tried to help, running her hand down the boy's back. "Come on, Mateo, sit down for a moment," she said, pointing to a chair near the wall. But he shook his head quickly, refusing with his eyes wide open, insisting, No, doctor, I have to tell you what happened, please." His desperation was so real that Alvaro didn't argue. He just stood in front of him, attentive. "Okay," he said. "Tell me everything you already told the nurse and everything you remember." Mateo swallowed. His right hand opened and closed, as if he didn't know what to do with it. She was walking normally on the sidewalk. She started looking at the ground. She wasn't going fast. She wasn't running at all, just walking. He pressed his fist against his own forehead, as if he wanted to, and suddenly his voice failed. He gestured with his hand, like someone who drops something. Suddenly she fell, like a stone, without putting out her hand, without trying to grab onto anything. Alvaro listened without blinking to the way the boy recounted the story, the way he imitated the fall in the air, showing that he was reliving the scene right there. She fell on her side, asked the doctor in the same calm tone. Yes, on her side, confirmed Mateo. Mateo, as if someone had turned off a switch inside her. You know, one second she was standing and the next, boom, on the ground. He opened his eyes wide, remembering the scene. I screamed. Everyone on the street stopped. One woman started praying. Another called someone on the phone. I approached her, and his voice broke again. Doctor. I touched her and she wasn't moving. Her fingers were shaking so much that it looked like they were going to fall off. Alvaro took a deep breath, trying to organize the information as he looked at the clearly devastated boy and the motorcycle. He asked how it happened. Mateo closed his eyes as if that were the hardest part. A motorcycle was coming slowly, very slowly, doctor. The guy on the motorcycle was really going slow. I saw him. It wasn't his fault when she fell. He tried to brake, but he was already on top of her. He hit her sideways. A blow that didn't seem fatal. The words came out choppy, as if he had to spit out each syllable. He pointed to his own leg. The guy on the motorcycle broke his leg and screamed in pain. But she was already... He choked up, his throat tightening. Doctor, she was already unconscious before the motorcycle hit her. Lucia handed him a tissue. Mateo took it without looking, just squeezing it between his fingers. We tried to lift her up. 2 men helped me, but he took a deep breath. his chest shaking. When I put my hand near her nose, nothing, doctor. Nothing. Not even a breath. His eyes filled with tears. I said, breathe. Please breathe. And nothing. Nothing. He cried with his head down. Doctor, she wasn't breathing. Although she wasn't badly hurt. She had almost no blood. Almost nothing. But she was lifeless. Alvaro felt his whole body grow cold with that phrase. He glanced sideways at the white sheet behind him, the still body under the sheet, waiting for him. Mateo said, taking another step forward, "You did the right thing by bringing her here. You tried to help. That's already a lot. No one can ask for more." But the boy shook his head vigorously. "No, doctor. No. I should have done more," he sobbed. I called her, but she didn't open her eyes. She didn't move anything. It was as if..." He couldn't finish. His throat closed up. Lucia touched his arm gently. "Mateo, did what you could. Please breathe. Look at me." He looked at her with eyes full of shame and sadness. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "I'm sorry. But seeing someone so young go so quickly, without warning," he beat his chest as if he wanted to remove a weight. "That broke me. I can't get the image out of my head." Alvaro felt a knot in his own chest. He had seen many people arrive like this, but there was something different about this boy. Something in the way he spoke, in how he clutched the handkerchief in his trembling hand, showing that all of this had struck him like a bolt of lightning. "Did you bring her here all by yourself?" Alvaro asked. Mateo nodded, quickly wiping his face, almost apologizing for crying. "I asked for help, but everyone was very nervous. The ambulance takes too long. A man helped me put her in the truck, and I drove as fast as I could, doctor. As fast as I could." He sighed defeatedly, but I think it was already too late. Alvaro remained silent for a few seconds. It was not a harsh or cold silence, but a heavy silence full of respect. The silence of someone who already carried a lot of sadness on his shoulders. "Son," he finally said, "no one, absolutely no one knows when something like this is going to happen. You did what any good-hearted person would do, and you did it quickly. That matters. It matters a lot." Mateo bit his lip, trying not to cry again. "Doctor," he said, looking Alvaro in the eyes for the first time, "I just want to know one thing. Did she suffer?" Alvaro looked at the covered body on the table, looked back at the boy, and replied with a simple truth. "From everything you've told me, I think it was quick. Very quick. Maybe she didn't even see the motorcycle." Mateo closed his eyes, letting 2 tears roll down his chin. He nodded slowly. "Thank you, doctor," he murmured. "Thank you, Alvaro." He put his hand on his shoulder again, firm and calm. "Go get some rest. Lucia will accompany you outside. I'll take care of her now." The boy took a deep breath, still trembling, and accepted when Lucia led him to the door. Mateo looked one last time at the white sheet on the table, with a mixture of guilt, fear, and a great sadness for someone so young. The door closed slowly behind him, and the hospital room returned to cold silence. Alvaro was left alone in the cold room, only the soft sound of the air conditioning filling the space. The door behind him still moved a little after Mateo left. He took a deep breath, trying to compose himself. He picked up the report that had been left on the metal tray, a simple piece of paper with a few quick notes. Nothing that said who the young woman was. Approximately 20 years old. No documents. He ran his thumb over the corner of the paper, as if that could prepare him, but it didn't. It never did. The white light above made everything shine too brightly, too coldly. He walked toward the table slowly, like a man approaching a place where the floor might break. He approached the body. The sheet covered everything, shoulders, face, feet. It seemed like just another body, like so many others, but something inside him, an old instinct, tightened his stomach, a silly, almost childish feeling that he should stop for a second, breathe steady himself. He didn't listen to that feeling. He grabbed the corner of the sheet with his fingertips, and in that small touch, he felt the coldness of the fabric covering someone who no longer had a voice. "Come on," he muttered to himself. He lifted it slowly, first the chest, then the neck, and when the face appeared, when the hair fell to one side, when the light touched the pale skin, the whole world stopped. It stopped so strongly that his own body froze. The sheet was trapped between his fingers. Air no longer entered or left. And then the sound came, a broken, almost animalistic sound. "No, no, no, no," he repeated, taking a step back as if he could stop seeing. "No, God, no, it can't be." He brought one hand to his mouth and the other to his forehead. His eyes burned. His body trembled, because the face there, was not that of a stranger. It was Mariana, his little girl, the dark-haired little girl who ran around the yard with her slippers on backwards, the teenager who left little notes in his food, the young woman with the shy smile, always hiding the fact that her heart sometimes failed. His daughter, Mariana. His voice failed, barely coming out. My girl, what did they do to you?" He fell to his knees as if someone had pushed him. He tried to lean on the table but couldn't. His hand slipped. He fell completely, without strength. It was as if the entire hospital had gone deaf, as if everything around him had disappeared. Only she and the sheet and the cold existed. His fingers reached up to the table, and he pulled himself up, clumsy, like a broken man. He stood up again, but his legs were shaking so much that they almost gave way. He touched her face with his fingertips, with the gentleness of someone touching something sacred. "My Marianita," he whispered, crying uncontrollably. "My darling, why were you alone? Why didn't you call me?" His chest hurt in a way that no medicine could cure. It was a father's pain, a pain that takes your breath away, a pain that burns inside. His vision blurred with tears. He closed his eyes tightly, but when he opened them, her face was still there, still cold, and worst of all, he knew. He knew that body there, that fragility, that horrible fate. He had known it from the first day he held newborn Mariana when the doctor said she has a heart problem. She will need care for the rest of her life. Alvaro breathed, but the air only half entered his lungs, as if they had closed. "I took such good care of you," he said, pressing his forehead against hers. "So much, my girl, all this time, and even so, he couldn't finish." His throat closed up, and a tear fell on her cold face. He ran his thumb gently, as if cleaning something that might hurt her. The memories came in waves. Him cooking late because she was weak, him working 36 hours to pay for medicine, him hiding his debts so as not to worry her, him putting his hand on her chest every night, afraid he wouldn't feel her heart. And now, there she was, and the world had been ripped from his hands. Alvaro lost control and let out a loud, ugly scream, the kind of scream someone makes when they just want everything to stop. No, no, no. The scream hit the cold walls. It went down the hallway where two nurses stopped, not knowing whether to enter. He took his daughter's face in both hands, as if begging her to come back, my girl. "My beautiful girl," he sobbed. "Daddy's here. I'm here." His world was reduced to a body under a white sheet, and the pain of a father who never imagined he would lift that fabric to see his own heart lying there. There, his legs gave way beneath him, as if they had been removed. The cold floor hit his knees, but he didn't even feel it. He only felt his hand trembling, the hand that seconds before had touched his daughter's face, a face he had known since she could fit completely in his arms. He rested his forehead on the metal of the table, trying to breathe, but the air wouldn't come in. His body trembled like a child's. Fearful, he murmured, "My God," choking, "My God, no, don't do this to me." The sound that came out of him was not that of a doctor, but of a broken father, a deep, heavy, wet cry, a cry that came from years and years of pent-up fear. He sobbed uncontrollably, his mouth open, trying to catch his breath, his hands pulling at his gown, as if trying to hold on to his own soul so it wouldn't leave. The door to the morgue, slowly. Two nurses entered, Javier and Rosa. They both stood still, paralyzed. They had seen families crying before, but never a doctor like this. Never someone so strong, so quiet, so dedicated, destroyed in this way. "Doctor," Javier tried to say, but his voice came out softly. Alvaro slowly raised his face, his eyes very red, his breathing short, almost a sob with each breath. He shook his head forcefully, pointing to the door. "Please leave," he said, his voice too broken. "Leave me alone with her." The nurses looked at each other. Rosa put her hand to her mouth. Javier took a step forward as if to insist, but stopped. He understood. Only Alvaro could sign. Only Alvaro could examine her. Only Alvaro had the right to touch that body with the gaze of someone who knew every scar on her since childhood. They stepped back and left silently, closing the door carefully, as if closing the door of a room where a heart is being crushed. Alvaro stayed there lying on the floor for a few minutes. That seemed like a lifetime. Afterwards, with great effort, he crawled to the chair next to the table and sat down without taking his eyes off his daughter. His hand sought hers, that little hand he used to hold when she had a fever, when she was afraid, when she asked if she would have a normal life with that weak heart. He held her hand just like when she was a baby, carefully, lovingly, afraid to squeeze too hard, and he stayed like that for minutes, then more minutes, almost a full hour. Time seemed to stand still. It seemed as if the entire hospital had stopped out of respect for his pain. He spoke softly, almost without a voice, as if he were talking to someone who was asleep. My girl, why did you leave like this?" he whispered, resting his face on her hand. "Forgive me. I should have to take better care of you. I should have been with you. Not like this. Not alone, my love." Each word seemed to tear pieces from his chest. It was an outpouring he had kept inside for years, a fear he avoided even thinking about. His tears fell on her cold hand, and he wiped them away with his fingers, as if he could still protect her from everything. Sometimes he tried to take a deep breath, but his breathing was short and shaky, almost a sob, stuck. Someone knocked on the door slowly, without force, just a little tap. He didn't even turn around. "The doctor is here. Is everything okay?" asked the voice of a nurse on the other side. Alvaro closed his eyes in pain. He didn't want to listen to anyone. He didn't want to explain anything. He didn't want to leave there. He just replied, without looking up, without raising his face. "Please go away. Leave us alone." And the hallway returned to silence. There, alone with his daughter, he looked like a man trying to stop time with his own hands, trying to prevent the world from continuing without her, trying to convince God, life, whatever, that this was a mistake. His farewell was not a farewell. It was a denial. He couldn't accept it. He couldn't get up. He couldn't imagine that behind that door there was a living world, while she, his little girl, was lying there motionless. He pressed her hand against his chest, as if he wanted to warm her, as if he wanted to bring her back with love alone. And he cried. He cried until his voice gave out. He cried until his body was exhausted. He cried like a father who had lost everything, because in that moment, she was everything to him. The room was so quiet that any little noise seemed enormous. After so much crying, Alvaro's body was limp, tired, heavy. He ran his hand over his face, took a deep breath, and tried to stand up. His legs were shaking. It seemed as if he had aged 20 years in a single hour. He knew he had to start the exam. He knew he had to do what he always did, even though his heart was crushed. But when he approached the table, his hand hesitated in the air. He put on his gloves slowly, as if each finger carried a weight that no one could see. The sound of latex snapping against skin filled the emptiness of the room. "Come on, Alvaro," he muttered to himself. "Just do your work for her." He grabbed the stethoscope with a trembling hand, looked at Mariana's pale face, and took a deep breath, preparing his body to endure what was coming. But before he could place the stethoscope on her chest, something interrupted everything. A small sound, almost nothing, like the sigh of someone sleeping. Alvaro froze. The stethoscope fell from his hand and hit the floor with a sharp thud that echoed throughout the mortuary. He whispered breathlessly. The sound came again, a soft puff like air escaping. It wasn't his imagination or a memory. It was real. His heart began to beat so hard that his chest burned. "No, it can't be," he murmured, his breath stuck in his throat. He approached his daughter's face slowly, like someone afraid of scaring away a little bird. And then he saw her eyelids move a little, very little, almost a tremor, but they moved. Mariana's eyes opened just one millim, as if she were returning from a long, heavy sleep, and then they closed again, slowly. Alvaro brought one hand to his mouth and the other to his chest, as if trying to stop his own heart from exploding. Mariana called out, almost without a voice, "Marianita, my love, my love." He brought his face to hers, so close that he could smell the faint scent of alcohol on the sheet. "Daughter," Can you hear me? Can you hear me, my girl?" he whispered, his voice trembling. There was no response, no words, but he saw what he needed to see. Her eyelids moved again, soft as tired wings. Alvaro ran his hand through her hair, his palm very light, as if she might break. "My God," he said, crying again, but now it was a different kind of crying. "My God, I'm hearing it. This is a sigh. That was a sigh." He pressed his ear to her chest, desperate for some sign. His breathing trembled when he heard another faint sound, almost nothing, like air passing through a half-open door. "Mariana, my girl, you're here, you're here," he repeated, his whole body vibrating. "Don't leave me, please don't leave me." Tears fell on her neck. His hand squeezed hers carefully, begging for any sign. And then, very slowly, her finger, her little finger, made a tiny movement, like a ghostly touch. Alvaro gasped for air, a dry sob, almost a stifled cry. He moved, gasped. My daughter moved. His eyes filled with a sparkle that the world had not seen in a long time, a sparkle of hope, strong, urgent, desperate. The whole room seemed to breathe along with that almost motionless body. It seemed as if the air had weight, life, light, and he, a broken father, felt once again that maybe, just maybe, he hadn't lost everything. He lifted his face, his eyes wide open, his mouth open as if he had forgotten how to breathe. A sob escaped him without his wanting it to, and suddenly his voice broke the silence. "She's alive!" The echo bounced off the metal walls and repeated it louder, as if calling to the whole world. "My daughter is alive! My daughter is alive!" The door burst open. Rosa and Javier rushed in. "What happened, doctor?" Rosa shouted, going straight to the table. Alvaro pointed to his daughter with trembling hands, crying, laughing, shaking, all at the same time. "She moved. She has a pulse. She's breathing." Javier put his hand on her chest and opened his eyes in surprise. "Doctor, yes, I'm sorry, it's very little, but it's there." Rosa covered her mouth in surprise. My God. She was... Dr. Medina, she was already given up for..." "It doesn't matter," Alvaro interrupted, his voice breaking. "Come on, we have to save her." He didn't wait for the stretcher. He didn't wait for protocol. He didn't wait for anything. He slipped his arms under her body, with a strength he didn't know he had, and pulled her toward his chest, as if he were carrying the most fragile thing in the world. Her body fell limply on top of him, not moving, but he held her tight, with that desperate embrace that only a father in distress can give. "Doctor, be careful." Javier tried to help. "Let me," Alvaro shouted, not aggressively, but with the urgency of someone who can't waste a second. "I'll take her myself." He ran down the hall, stumbling, bumping into the walls, almost falling, but he didn't let go of Mariana for a single second. The nurses ran behind him. The hall was empty, but it seemed too narrow for such a rush. His gown flapped as he ran. Tears streamed down his face. His heart was beating so fast it felt like it was going to burst out of his chest. "Prepare the room!" he shouted to the first worker he saw. "Right now, right now!" People moved aside, not understanding what was happening. Some crossed themselves. Others asked what had happened. "It's a miracle. Wasn't that the girl who..." But no one had time to answer. Alvaro pushed open 2 doors, almost knocking one down. The bright light of the emergency room hit him in his face, revealing a sweaty man crying, pale but more determined than ever. He placed Mariana on the stretcher very carefully, as if he were placing something sacred there. "Quickly," he said in a firm voice, as if the world had to obey. "She has a pulse. She's breathing. It's weak, but it's there." Rosa ran to get the equipment. Javier removed the oxygen tube from the stand. Another nurse adjusted the stretcher, and Alvaro stayed there beside her, holding her hand so tightly that it seemed as if she would leave again if he let go. "Hang in there, my girl," he whispered, his face close to hers. "Daddy is here. I will never leave you again." The whole hospital seemed to be watching the scene without breathing. Every second was a lump in his throat. Every movement seemed like a fight against death itself. And everything inside him screamed the same thing. She came back. She fought. Life was not over there. The following hours were a blur. Monitors beeping. Masks, gloves, people coming and going. If the story caught you, hit the like button so it can reach more people. Alvaro didn't leave Mariana's stretcher. She was now in intensive care, connected to thin cables, her chest rising and falling, slowly with the help of oxygen, still weak, still far away. But he stayed there, standing next to her, his hand holding her foot under the sheet, as he did when she was a child and had a fever. It was his way of saying, "Daddy is here." The nurses whispered in a corner, "I've never seen anything like this." "Me neither." They said she was already dead. Imagine if they had handed over the body. Alvaro listened, but did not respond. His mind was elsewhere, part of it there, watching the numbers flashing on the heart monitor, part of it trapped in that cold room in the morgue, remembering the white sheet. A technician entered the intensive care unit with a laptop. "Subscribe so you don't miss out on more true stories like this." "Doctor, the cardiologist from the Capitol is already on the video call," he said. "I put the computer in the other room. Alvaro can come." Alvaro looked at Mariana. Her hand gently squeezed his foot. "My girl, Daddy's going to go and come back quickly," he whispered softly. "I'm just going to talk to a doctor. We're going to find out what happened to you." He leaned down and kissed her softly on the forehead, then walked slowly to the small room next to the ICU, where they had placed a laptop on a makeshift table. The screen was already on. On the other side, a man in a white coat with gray hair and a serious face wore thin-rimmed glasses. Behind him was a wall covered with diplomas. "Good evening, Dr. Medina," said the man in a firm voice. "I'm Dr. Herrera, a cardiologist at the Central Hospital." Alvaro sat down in a chair, tired, his body hunched over like someone who had been carrying the weight of the world all day. "Good evening, doctor," he replied to a flustered "thank you for seeing us so late." Herrera waved his hand as if to say, "Don't worry." "Lucia sent me all of your daughter's tests," he said, looking to the side and shuffling some papers that weren't clearly visible on camera. "Old tests, the history you wrote by hand, it's all here." Alvaro swallowed hard when he heard his daughter. Every time someone said his daughter, his chest hurt. "Doctor," he began with a broken voice. "I saw her in the morgue, unresponsive, not breathing, her pulse barely detectable." He closed his eyes for a moment, as if the images were coming back to him with force. "It was the worst thing I've ever experienced." Herrera took a deep breath and spoke in a calm but direct tone. "Dr. Medina, what your daughter had was not death." The words fell hard and dry. Alvaro frowned. "How was it not death? I saw her myself. There were no signs." The cardiologist tilted his head slightly. "Doctor, I understand your confusion," he said, "but according to the tests and what you've told me, what she experienced fits with something we call catalepsy. In this case, a severe episode of catalepsy associated with the heart condition she already has." Alvaro fell silent, his heart beating fast. "Catalepsy," he repeated slowly. "Like those cases where the person seems dead, but isn't," Herrera replied. "The body enters a state of rigidity. The muscles become hard. Breathing almost disappears. The pulse drops to very low levels. Heart activity is minimal but still present. From the outside, without the proper equipment, it looks like death, but it's not." Alvaro's hands began to sweat. He wiped them on his pants without noticing. "But doctor," the paramedics checked her and didn't feel anything. When she arrived, her voice failed, and I saw her as if she were a lifeless body. Life. Herrera felt sympathetic. "I read the story." He said, "Noisy street, fallen motorcycle, people screaming, siren blaring, pressure, rush." The paramedics tried to evaluate her there in the middle of all that, in an extreme situation like that of his daughter, with a very weak heart. The heartbeats are so delicate, so low, that any distraction, any noise makes them go unnoticed. Alvaro looked at the table as if he needed to hold on to it to keep from falling, then said in a low voice, almost afraid of the answer, "At no point, not for a second, was she." Herrera finished clearly. "Mariana was never dead." Silence. A heavy, thick silence filled the room. The phrase spun around in Alvaro's head, bouncing from one side to the other. Mariana was never dead. What's on your mind right now? Write it in the comments. He remembered the morgue, the white sheet, the scream that gave him the feeling of having lost everything, and now those words. Doctor, he spoke with tears in his eyes again. Yes, had he not heard that sigh, if he had followed protocol, he could not finish. His hand trembled on the table on the other side. Herrera paused respectfully before answering. Dr. Medina said in a lower voice, I need to be honest with you. In many cases like this, the body is taken, prepared, and buried as if it were dead, and no one notices. Alvaro felt his stomach churn. An ugly heat rose up his neck. He put his hand on his chest as if trying to hold his heart in place so it wouldn't fall out. Are you telling me, he murmured with difficulty, that my daughter could have... He didn't have the courage to say the last words. Herrera carefully completed the sentence. Yes, doctor. Mariana could have been buried alive. The words fell like a stone inside him. Alvaro's hands went straight to his face. He squeezed his eyes shut tightly, but tears still spilled out from the sides. A cruel image began to form in his mind. A closed coffin, earth falling on top of it, and she was inside with a weak heart trying to breathe, and no one listening. He almost vomited from the pain. God, he whispered through clenched teeth. God. The cardiologist continued without drama, but without hiding the seriousness. Her heart disease makes everything more difficult. The heart is already weak, already working at its limit. In an episode of catalepsy, it drops to a very low level, but does not stop. It is as if the whole body went into minimal mode, trying to survive, almost invisible, but alive. Alvaro remembered the little finger moving, the soft sigh, the eyelids trembling. It was just that, he murmured. A sigh, a small movement, a sound so soft, and that saved her life, said Herrera. And the fact that you are a doctor and a father. Others might not have noticed, but you stayed, you were close. You heard, you saw, and you acted quickly. Alvaro shook his head in shock. But I took her to the morgue, doctor, he said guiltily. I accepted that she was dead. I left her in that cold place, as if his voice broke and his effort to continue, as if she were already gone. Herrera looked at him through the screen with a firm but humane gaze. You did what any doctor would do with the information you had at the time, he explained, without clear signs in a context of abuse. With a weak heart history, everything pointed to death. No one is trained to suspect catastrophe in all cases. It's rare, very rare. Even so, Alvaro couldn't forgive himself. He bit his lip in anger at himself. I've been working with the dead for years, he said hoarsely. But I never ever imagined that I would almost put my own daughter among them. His eyes filled with tears again, deeper, heavier. Herrera took a deep breath. The important thing now, he said, is that it didn't happen. You listened to her, you saw her, and you acted. We need to focus on that and on what comes next. Adjusting her medication, planning stronger treatment for her heart, and making sure episodes like this don't happen again. Alvaro nodded, his mind still far away, but part of him clung to a single phrase. It didn't happen. He repeated it softly, as if trying to convince himself. It didn't happen. It didn't happen. But inside, a painful truth cut like a knife. It could have happened. A few more minutes would have been enough. One more shift would have been enough. Longer. It would have been enough if he had signed the papers quickly, as he did with so many others. Mariana would have left without being dead. He looked up again and wiped his face with the back of his hand. Dr. Herrera said more firmly, "Tell me honestly, it's a miracle she's alive." The cardiologist hesitated for a second. "Doctor, I don't use that word lightly," he replied. "But as a doctor, I can say that with the condition she had, the episode she suffered, the place where she was, and how it was discovered, the chances were minimal. Very, very small. What happened to her is something that I have hardly ever seen in my many years of practice." Alvaro let out a sad smile through his tears, then murmured, "Maybe God isn't done with her yet." "Maybe," Herrera replied respectfully. "But for now, he's not done with you either. You're going to need to be stronger than ever." The call ended a while later with technical combinations, medications, and repeat tests. But Alvaro hardly registered the details. What kept repeating in his head like a heavy drum were the phrases, "Mariana was never dead. She could have been buried alive." He got up from the chair, his legs still weak, and returned to the intensive care unit. When he entered, the sound of the machines enveloped him again. Beep, 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 the most precious sound in the world at that moment. He slowly approached the bed and looked at her face, pale and distant, but with a thread of life resisting. He rested his forehead on his hand and spoke softly, holding back his tears. "My girl, forgive me for taking you to that cold place. Forgive me for believing that you were gone. I'm sorry. I promise you, I'll never treat you like a body again. Never again. Never again." The tears fell on her skin, and he didn't wipe them away. He let them fall. It was the only way he had at that moment to wash away the guilt. On the outside, she looked like a young girl sleeping deeply, but on the inside, a battle had been fought in silence, hidden in the almost invisible beats of a sick heart. A battle that no one heard until a broken father in a morgue decided to stay a few more minutes by his daughter's side. Minutes that separated a death certificate from a second chance at life. The news took less than a morning to spread through San Miguel del Rio. First, it was the receptionist who whispered to another employee that Dr. Medina's daughter was breathing again in the morgue. Then it was the ambulance driver repeating it to a neighbor at the door. Then the neighbor told his wife. The wife called her sister, and in a few hours, the whole small town, united, full of people who knew the doctor by sight or by stories, was already saying the same phrase. The girl who came back from the dead. People arrived to the hospital with eyes full of curiosity, fear, and faith. Some ladies brought simple flowers cut from their own gardens, wrapped in newspaper. Others brought prayer cards, little pieces of paper with prayers, rosaries. "It's to leave in his room, my son. They say it's to protect that girl," said an old woman with a trembling hand. The nurses tried to control the entrance, but someone always slipped in who saw Dr. Medina in the hallway and would start crying just at the sight of him. He walked slowly, almost shuffling his feet, with his wrinkled gown and swollen eyes. He looked like a man who had fought a hurricane and lost, surviving by miracle. Some people approached him cautiously. "Doctor, we are praying for her. God was good. You are a miracle, doctor. A miracle." Alvaro just nodded his head and thanked them in a low voice, but his gaze remained distant, as if he were still trapped in that cold room in front of the white sheet. When he finally entered the room where Mariana was resting, the outside world disappeared. The room was small and quiet, lit by a soft light that fell on her pale face. She was awake, not completely, but enough to recognize her father. Her eyes, still heavy, met his. He approached slowly, pulled up a chair, and sat down next to the bed, as if kneeling before something sacred. "Forgive me, my daughter," he whispered with a broken voice. "I almost lost you. I should have been with you. I shouldn't have let you go out alone. Please forgive me." The tears began to fall again. He tried to wipe them away, but they wouldn't stop. Mariana slowly raised her hand, her weak, thin hand, and with effort touched his hand. "Dad, it wasn't your fault," she murmured in a low, drawn-out voice. "None of this was your fault." He closed his eyes, feeling it pierce his chest like a knife and heal him at the same time. "I should have known," he insisted, trembling. "I'm a doctor. I should have noticed something. Anything." "Dad, please," she repeated, squeezing his hand. "Don't blame yourself." But he still didn't believe it. The guilt burned in his chest like fire. Hours later, new tests arrived, new numbers, new explanations that no one wanted to hear, but had to be said. The doctor from the capital spoke calmly. "The results show something we didn't see before. Mariana's condition has worsened in recent weeks." Alvaro looked up suddenly. "How did it get worse?" he asked, confused and angry with himself. "There are signs of previous episodes. Fainting spells, shortness of breath, severe arrhythmias, things that were not reported." He turned to look at his daughter, who immediately looked away. "Mariana," his voice grew serious, "you fainted on your own and didn't tell me anything." She bit her lip, her eyes filling with silent tears. "Dad, I didn't want to worry you," she replied, her voice trembling. "You already work so hard, always tired, always suffering because of me. I didn't want to." Alvaro clenched his fist tightly, squeezed his eyes shut, and took a deep breath, as if trying to control a storm in his chest. "My girl," he said, his voice breaking, "why you kept that from me?" "Why was I afraid, Dad?" she admitted, crying softly. "Afraid of seeing you sad. Afraid you would think I was going to—" She couldn't finish. He took her face in both hands gently. "Don't do that to me," he whispered, resting his forehead on hers. "Don't keep anything from me, ever again." Mariana cried. He cried, the sadness of both of them filling the room, but it was a living sadness. Not the sadness of loss, but the sadness of those who almost lost each other. Outside, the whole city was talking about the girl who came back from the dead, but inside that little room, there was something else. A father trying to piece together his own heart, and a daughter trying to apologize for hiding what was hurting her. And although they didn't know it, they were both beginning a healing process that only someone who has almost died can understand. Mariana's story did not remain within the walls of the hospital. In less than 2 days, it had already become a video, an audio message on WhatsApp, a Facebook post by her aunts, and people all over the city were talking about her as if she were something sacred. The girl who came back from the dead, the daughter of Dr. Medina. God pulled her back, and when those phrases began to spread, something unexpected happened. A giant wave of solidarity began to arrive at the hospital door. First, it was neighbors bringing simple bags with clean clothes, soft sheets, and nice-smelling soap. Then people from other cities sent expensive medicines, inhalers, vitamins, borrowed equipment, boxes of IV fluids, and envelopes with crumpled money. People arrived with sadness, as if they didn't want to bother, but with shining eyes. "It's to help her," said a lady in a flowery dress, putting 100 pesos in a transparent box. "I know it's not much, but God multiplied this in my heart." Another woman came with 3 jars of homemade soup, still warm, so that the girl could get her strength back. She needs to eat well. And there was an old lady, about 70 years old, wearing an old shawl, with tiny hands clutching a rosary. She asked to see the doctor, and the nurses made way for her. When she saw Alvaro sitting in the hallway, tired, with deep circles under his eyes and his shoulders slumped, she approached him slowly and placed her wrinkled hand on his arm and said in a soft but firm voice, "Tell the doctor that God used him to save her." Alvaro tried to smile, but the smile turned into tears. Before he could finish, he bowed his head and cried right there, sitting on the hard hospital bench, with the lady stroking his arm, like a grandmother comforting her grandson. It was no longer a cry of fear or guilt. It was a cry of gratitude, so great that it could not fit in his eyes. He dried his face, took a deep breath, and said, "Thank you, truly thank you." The woman smiled as if she understood the pain just by looking at him. God brought her back. Now take care of her. And she walked away slowly, the rosary hanging in her hand. By the end of that week, the story had already crossed borders. People from far, far away began to send messages asking how they could help, how much the girl needed, that she had to live, and without Alvaro expecting it, what he would never have dared to ask for, began to arrive. Large donations, much larger than any salary he could earn. The hospital director entered the room one day with a tablet in his hand, his eyes wide open. "Doctor, people have raised the necessary funds for her treatment in the capital. Everything, absolutely everything." Alvaro opened his eyes, unable to believe it. "How so quickly, doctor?" "It's because everyone saw what you did. Everyone saw your pain, your struggle, your faith. They just want to help." He covered his mouth with his hand, trying not to cry, but he couldn't. Mariana, lying down, smiled softly when she saw her dad break down, now with joy. "Dad," she whispered, "it's over. It's over." He took her hand in both of his, as if holding a tiny, warm, living miracle. A few days later, she traveled to the capital, to the big hospital full of modern equipment, full of people who spoke quickly. It seemed like another planet to her and to him as well. The procedure she needed was expensive, complicated, delicate, the kind of treatment that, if it depended only on his salary, he would never have been so close to getting. But that day did come. Alvaro stayed in the waiting room for hours. He couldn't even sit still. He paced back and forth, running his hand through his hair, praying softly, clutching the rosary that someone had left in the pocket of his gown. Every time a door opened, He turned his face, waiting for news. His heart didn't rest for a second, and when the doctor finally came out, removing her mask and smiling tiredly, he almost collapsed. "Dr. Medina," she said calmly, "it went well. Very well. Your daughter is strong." He needed a few seconds to understand. Then he covered his face with both hands and cried again, but it was a clean, good cry, full of life. Weeks passed, and on the day Mariana returned to the San Miguel del Rio hospital, the sun was shining brightly, illuminating the simple hallway where it had all begun. Alvaro was waiting for her, standing in the middle of the hallway with his hands clasped in front of his chest, his heart beating fast like a child's. When she appeared, walking one step after another, smiling, he put his hand to his mouth, unable to believe it. Mariana whispered as if saying the name for the first time. She opened her arms, and he ran to her and hugged her so tightly that it seemed he wanted to press her to his chest, so he would never let her go. She laughed softly, resting her face on his shoulder. "Dad, I'm here," she said in a soft voice. "I'm alive." He closed his eyes and replied in a whisper, "Thank you, God. Thank you." And there, in that simple hallway, a father and daughter were reborn together, a rebirth that came not only from the miracle, but from the faith, the pain of the entire city, and a love that never gave up. That night seemed like any other in the hospital, but it wasn't. The hallway was silent, except for the distant beeping of a monitor in some room. Alvaro walked slowly, with heavy steps, feeling every corner of that building that had been his second home for so many years. He entered the small room where he always left his gown. The yellow light illuminated the old table, scratched on top, marked by pens, papers, and he stopped there and looked at the coat hanging on the hook, that white fabric that had absorbed the smell of medicine, sweat, fear, and responsibility, that piece of fabric that had accompanied him in the joy of saving lives and in the pain of losing them. He took it down from the hook carefully, ran his hand over it as if saying goodbye to an old friend, then folded it carefully and left it on the table. "I can't keep working with the dead." Almost in a whisper, with no one in the room to hear, he took a deep breath, his voice breaking at the end. "I almost lost my daughter on that table." His eyes filled with tears. He blinked slowly, letting 2 tears fall onto the folded gown. In his other hand, he held an envelope, the handwritten resignation letter full of cross-outs, because he had written it so many times that he no longer knew how to begin it. When he handed the envelope to the hospital director, it was as if a weight he had been carrying for years had been lifted. "Are you sure, Dr. Medina?" the director asked with a sad, almost pleading look. Alvaro just nodded. "I am." And in that moment, for the first time in many years, he breathed lightly, a strange new lightness that was almost frightening. It was as if he had finally let go of the last thread that tied him to the shadows of the dead. Later, before leaving, he walked towards the morgue. He stopped at the door. His heart ached. The room was empty, silent, with that cold white light he knew so well. It was the same place where he had felt the greatest despair of his life, where he had screamed and cried, where the floor had given way beneath him, where he had believed his daughter was dead. He walked over to the metal table and ran his hand over it slowly, as if touching something sacred and terrible at the same time. The surface brought back every second of that night, the raised white sheet, her daughter's face, falling to her knees, the scream, the sigh. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Thank you, God, for bringing my little girl back to me." The sound remained trapped there in that cold air. Then she turned around, walked to the door, and with a firm movement, closed it, as if closing a chapter that hurt too much to leave open. Outside, the hallway was lit by the afternoon sun coming through the windows, a warm golden tone unlike anything inside that building. And there, leaning against the wall, was Mariana, standing with a small, tired smile, but full of life. When she saw her dad, she smiled even wider, one of those smiles that light up your whole face. "Dad, let's go home," she asked in a soft voice. Alvaro didn't respond with words. He just walked over to her and hugged her. A strong hug, holding as if holding what he loved most in the world. A hug that said everything he couldn't say with words. "I love you. I was scared. I thought I had lost you. Thank you for coming back." She rested her face on his chest and closed her eyes, feeling the security of that hug that had accompanied her since she was a child. They stayed like that for a while in silence, just feeling each other's hearts. The sun bathed them both, warming that moment as if the world were starting over right there in that embrace. And in a way, it was. Because that day, Alvaro not only saved his daughter's life, he saved his own soul and opened up space for a future that he almost didn't get to live with her. If this story touched you, write in the comments. Subscribe to the channel to hear stories that warm the soul.